Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. Actually coming to you live from the All Things Open event here in Raleigh, North Carolina. So we've moved the massive studios. And this week we're going to do a bunch of different things. It'll be myself on some of them. Josh Atwell is going to join us on a few of these shows as a guest host for Aaron. And so for this first one, we're very, very excited. We're going to get a number of the speakers from the event here today to come and talk about their areas of expertise. And we are very lucky to have Melissa Nysewander, who is Director of Data Services at Fidelity here in the Triangle area. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So you are doing a talk this afternoon called Open Data for Business. We were talking a little bit before. This is sort of an area of passion for you. Give us a little background.
It is. Okay, so I'm very passionate about this subject, about open data. This is the first time I've been speaking about it, so completely new slides, completely new deck. But I'm very excited about this. So my background, I am an ex-scientist, an ex-real scientist. So I'm a data scientist now. I have my PhD in astronomy, and when I was an astronomer, we used a lot of open data. There's massive amounts. There's huge catalogs of every source in the sky. There's actually a catalog that has every source in the sky. There's giant surveys with image data. So I've been using open data since before I realized open data was such a thing. After I left astronomy and I started working in environmental science. This is a long story, but when I was in environmental science, it was the same thing. We used a massive amount of open data. A lot of this was government data. Some of this was data from like NGOs or nonprofits that created it. Mainly academic government type of data. It's so incredibly valuable. And then about 4 years ago, 2011, I heard of this thing called data science, and I was like, wow, I think I'm a data scientist. So I left government work, and I started working at Fidelity. It's been fantastic. I love it. So I'm at Fidelity Investments, and we also use a lot of the very same data that I was using in environmental science. We don't use astronomy data, but we do use like the same kind of data that we were using to map people and how they move around in the environment. We use here for marketing purposes. And I realized kind of early on that they were paying massive, massive amounts of money for the exact same data that I had been using months before completely for free. And so I realized that there is this whole industry about processing open data, giving it a nice pretty GUI, a wrapper, doing some slight transformations, and repurposing it and selling it to businesses. And it's a completely valid business model. I don't want to say that these companies are
right.
I mean, they're great companies. However, in a lot of cases, I think businesses are kind of throwing their money away in some cases. If you have a developer, you have the capabilities of going out and getting this data on your own, testing it out before you actually make some sort of investment, buying it from a third-party source. There's a massive amount of open data out there that basically for any business case you could think of, there's some open data out there that's somehow relevant. And my talk is going to be basically... it's very broad, but I'm going to be talking about the types of business models around open data. I'm going to be talking about a couple of use cases on how a big company like a Fidelity could be using them to enrich their models.
So give us some examples, right? So you talked about scientific data, government data about could be voting, could be whatever. But Fidelity's interested not only from their financial models, how do they go, invest in the marketplace, but also things like, people's aging rates, people's, demographics, where do they live, all those things about sort of your life that relates to your money in various ways. So give us an example, even just in the financial services, what types of open data might be available that people might not readily know about?
Well, I mean, The most obvious source that people probably do know about, is the census. So all of that data about demographics, the population, where they live, how they're moving around, that is all from the census. But it's not, but there's so much more that the Census Bureau does. There's one survey out called the American Community Survey, and it's a subsample of the population, and it goes so much deeper into people's lives, into their spending habits, into their income. So a lot of economic data that we might want to know about on a very fine grain as well. So the census does go on different regional grains down to the census tract level, which is pretty specific, which is a pretty specific area, smaller than zip codes. The census also does an entire different census called the economic census. So it's tons and tons of data that they're collecting all the time. It's so much more than the decadal every 10-year census.
Yeah. Okay. No, it makes sense. So, as I look at your bio and so forth, especially for the event, you list yourself as an advocate for data-driven decisions and applications of using scientific method to solve business problems, right? Which, for a lot of companies, even this morning, like at Red Hat, there was an email that went out and said, "Hey, are we a data-driven company?" And if people like to talk about, are we data-driven? Do we make decisions? But what does that mean when you say you're an advocate for? What do you translate that into sort of business lingo for people that go, well, I got a quarterly number to make, or we need to improve in some way. Like, how do you connect those dots, or what does that mean? You're advocating for it,
right? So, very tangibly, at Fidelity, I was Fidelity's first data scientist hire. Okay. And since then, I have my role. I've moved throughout different organizations. I call myself an advocate partly because I have spoken a lot internally at Fidelity. I've worked with a lot of different groups across the company trying to help them develop a data science practice.
Okay.
But more broadly, I think being data-driven just means that you have evidence. Yeah. That it's no longer about kind of the old business models of I have a hunch, so I'm going to do it. No, stop it with your hunches. Actually look at the data. We have data on people. So, very tangibly, I recently did a project with our talent acquisition team. Okay. And they had a hunch. They thought hiring people from a specific industry into a specific role, specific type of role, like a customer service role, going from these specific types of industries, they're probably going to be better. And I'm like, that's fine. That's great that you have that hunch. Let's test out that hunch. We have the data. I know what industries, I have the resumes. I know what industries people previously worked in. And I can tie that to their actual performance on the job and see, is there some sort of correlation between working in a previous industry versus customer service scores. Right. So let's test it out. Let's see if this is true. Yeah. So that's what I think of data-driven.
Okay. So, and I have to imagine it's, number one, like you said, you have the data, which means there's some historical evidence in this context. Number two is I have to have a way to test that data, right? Do it in small chunks, do it in big chunks, be able to sort of look back at, did our hypothesis work? All those sort of scientific method types of things.
Right.
And then explaining to people, we can do those things, right? Like computational stuff is pretty cheap these days. It's readily available. Like we can ask those questions, get those answers, and then proceed from there.
Right. And it's different around the company. So people in kind of our tech arm of the company, they agree. I don't have to do a lot of convincing. People in marketing, they're typically they're numbers driven. They understand the power of a model. In HR. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
It's people. It's
people. Yeah, it is. Right. And it does make what we do a lot more difficult because we're not talking about millions of customers and trying to figure out if we can get some lift for an email campaign. It's looking at an individual person and looking at all of their experiences and seeing, how can we build the best employee? How can we create the best environment for our people to thrive in?
Yeah. For people that aren't data scientists, you look out at the marketplace, there's some companies that deliver, say SaaS applications that are so unbelievably data rich but you just get an output from it, right? And it could be everything from a Google search or a map to your favorite fantasy football team with all this data to Fidelity's online tools, whatever they might be, right?
Right.
And then and those sort of like hide big data and analytics and all of this stuff. And then you've got a lot of companies in the marketplace who are out there selling you this. You can find the needle in the haystack. You can what's the reality? I mean, how mature is the technology? Where's the big gap still, or is it really just a lot of education?
I think the market is flooded right now with a lot of people trying to give solutions, trying to sell solutions. A lot of the data scientists practicing at companies right now, I know sometimes they kind of cobble together from different folks, but I mean, we're using the big packages, or a lot of people are just going open source and doing everything yourself.
Okay.
Because I think it depends on the size of the company and the maturity of their analytics group. For a smaller company, you don't have the manpower to develop internal solutions that are probably going to be a lot better than these kind of external things, kind of the prepackaged stuff.
Right.
The prepackaged might be good for a smaller company that can't invest in their own people.
Right. Right. Yeah, you can't find the data scientist, or you're in a location where you can't get them, or whatever. It's cost.
Exactly.
So I think it was maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, like there was a big article in, I think it was the Harvard Business Review. It said, data scientist is the sexiest job in America. Or
totally.
But back then, I mean, you couldn't go to an event where every job board was posted like, we need data scientists, desperate to find. Is that getting better? I mean, is it like, are the kids coming up through the colleges? Are people like yourself realizing like, I have the skills to be a data scientist? Like, where is that in terms of, just skill sets and numbers and stuff?
It's still difficult to find a data scientist.
Okay.
We've tried to hire some. It is still difficult, but colleges and universities are trying to help us meet this demand, and programs like, kind of like the Iron Yard that has a Python class that's fairly that can be data science heavy. So these programs are trying to help meet the demand of data scientists, but it's difficult. They are producing a lot of entry-level data scientists, but so you have a lot of people out there that don't have a ton of experience, and a lot of you need a lot of data science is an art, and you need some experience to be able to develop that art, to develop that craft.
Yeah.
So it's still difficult to hire the upper levels. Although entry level, it's getting better.
Yeah. So mentioned earlier, like all these parts of our lives, data is sort of just there, right? I mean, it's like I said, it could be everything from fantasy football to whatever. If like we have kids, we were saying earlier, you've got kids. My kids are still young enough; they don't know what they want to be when they grow up. And is there a path that you might recommend? I mean, is this I guess what I'm kind of wondering is, it feels like maybe there's two paths, right? There's the path that says, it's going to be very math-centric up through school and statistics and modeling and all sorts of. Do you think we'll see a point where somebody goes like, I really love, I don't know, marketing or some other aspect of life, but they go, but everything tends to be data-centric. Like I should have a minor in something so I have some idea when I'm talking to you what that, like,
totally.
Does that make sense?
Will
we see that over time?
It makes a lot of sense. Definitely the core skills are math and stats, development, so being able to program. I've been programming since I got into graduate school, even before that. I'm not a real developer, but you have to have that kind of skill. You have to have the technical skill. And this is, it's a debate among data scientists, but I'm on the side of you have to know a fundamental programming language to work with data, because you have to be able to touch it and manipulate it at its most raw form.
Yeah, and is that R and Python primarily, or could be anything that you can figure out how to?
I think R and Python are probably the best, but I've been doing basically the same. I've been a data scientist since before there was a term called data scientist, and I worked primarily in like C++ and Fortran.
Okay.
So
part of it's just understanding how to do some basic programming.
Definitely.
And then evolving.
So when we hire somebody, like my team, we work in Python and R. However, if somebody comes in and they know Java, I know that they can pick up Python. I don't know. They don't have to be like the master Python programmer. If they know a language, I know that they can learn another language.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at.
Okay, very cool. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap this up with one last question. So you mentioned Iron Yard. Like, for folks who don't have the access maybe to a bunch of university research or whatever, like we're here at an open conference. We're talking about community. Like, what are the other places to go, I don't know, socialize with people, get access to tools, all those types of things?
And that's one of the most beautiful things about the data scientist community, because there's tons of open places to get. So, like go online, a ton of classes, the massive online classes like Coursera. There's a Johns Hopkins data science specialization there that, if you have the interest and you think you want to do this, go there, do that. There's tons of meetup groups, and some of my friends and I joke about it seems like every month there's another specialized data science or analytics meetup group. However, there is a demand for it.
Right.
Tons of people are really excited about this. So, go to Meetup, go to Coursera. One of the most beautiful things about data science right now is that people are coming to it from so many non-traditional areas. Like, I was an astronomer,
Yeah.
and that's how it's been. So,
Yeah. No, I know I had friends who, were physics PhDs and ended up getting into Wall Street or getting into even networking or just other areas because, the grants weren't there for one thing, but they were for somewhere else. And
right.
So excellent.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Melissa, thank you so much for the time today.
Yeah.
Good luck on the talk, folks. We'll get the things in the show notes. We'll get pointers to the talk in the show notes, but good luck on that.
Great.
And appreciate the time today. And we'll have more from All Things Open this week. Thanks, everybody.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.